grid on YouTube. Okay, so we'll start by please clicking participants and then raise hand if you have any questions for the board. I think we're going to start with a short presentation by Stuart. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. Thank you very much, Todd. I will just set that up now. Bear with me. Right, thank you all very much for joining this session. This is an opportunity to hear a little bit about TPF, what we do. Many of you will already know what TPF is about, but this is a refresher for those who don't. And then it's your chance to ask questions. So for this session, any questions Todd will pick up and then he'll be asking the panel. If you'd like your questions toward a particular person on the panel, then please also make that clear. You could use the Zoom chat. I'm not sure if Todd is monitoring Slack. We had a couple of questions on GitHub, but it's probably easier now just to stick with the Zoom chat and maybe the Slack channel for now. Okay, so very briefly about the Perl Foundation. North America registered foundation, established in 2000 and operated by volunteers. What do we do? What does a TPF do? So governance and support. The bank manager has been a significant role in for many years. Also, I guess, customer services department, managing stakeholders, communicating with various different people within the community. The important bit is it's the work that the technical people who are developing our language are not necessarily focused on. It's those supporting peripheral activities that are required. And it's worth noting that Perl, unlike other languages, is not managed, owned, the property of, or directly governed by any one organisation. And that's the key reason why TPF is here. It's not a commercial entity that is governing Perl and Raku. It's the Perl Foundation. We do our work through various initiatives. So you may have read in previous months some of the information around the initiatives that we're working on. So community affairs team has been the focus of the last few months. And this really is to ensure that our community and the things that we do are professional, good quality, welcoming to new people, as well as supporting our existing people as well. Brand and advocacy, the marketing in brackets, it's not traditional marketing as you would do as a company, but there's things that we need to do. I have a session tomorrow around brand and messaging to focus on that. But it's about the perception of Perl. That's the key point. And of course, there's been lots of comments around that following Sawyer's talk. So it's a very hot topic, and we need to manage that and organise that from the Perl Foundation. Volunteer support is important. We need to do more of that. We could do with volunteers to help us with our volunteer outreach to make sure that we're looking after the people in our network as well. Supporting development through grants, managing sponsors as well. Sponsors need to be looked after. So there's a customer services activity around sponsors. We need to, recently, I think we've probably connected up with European communities, possibly more than previous, but we still have work to do with further outreach. And also some support around some of the tools and infrastructure around Perl and Raku. I mentioned about the community affairs team. It matters a lot that we're seen as a professional community, that organisations who are going to make significant investments in their technology, should they choose Perl, need to have confidence that we are going to look after them, we're going to be sustainable, that the community is well managed and cohesive. So it really is important that we manage that. So this is where the community affairs team, as one of our first initiatives, has been launched. The people within that are funded, they've been trained, and they are there all through the year. I'm repeating some of the things I mentioned at the opening session, but that has been an important part of what we're doing. We need volunteers. There's all sorts of things we need. We have, we can always, Todd could do with people supporting him. He's got a great team already. There's other conferences as well that happen or that could happen. Things are obviously a bit strange at the minute, but we'll see what happens in coming years. You can see there's a list of things. So there's all sorts of things that we could do with support with. So if you are interested in helping non-technically, or even if you know somebody who's not a developer, someone you work with who's involved in some of these other non-developer activities, then maybe you could introduce them if they want to help the Perl Foundation as well with both Perl and Raku. So various volunteer roles. Our questions to you. There's some questions there on there. I'll leave those for you to think about. You might have your own questions. So we'd like to hear your responses to these. And now if I can hand to Todd, who's going to moderate questions, and the panel, I welcome you to ask whatever you'd like.
So I had one quick suggestion, Stuart.
Yes.
I think the board members in this session should introduce ourselves so people know who's who.
Of course, yes, please. Well, would you start?
I guess I'll start. So hi, my name is Dave Rolski. I've been on the board, I think, like a year and a half, I want to say. I honestly don't remember exactly when I started. And recently, I've been helping out with some of the community affairs team stuff, as well as trademark things and doing some email admin for us as well. So on to somebody else. I'll pick Stuart since you're next in the list in Zoom.
Right, yep, thank you very much. Okay, so Stuart McIntosh, I've been with the Perl Foundation a very short time, since September. I've been involved with Perl from a technological perspective since the mid-90s. I must say, I was involved in something that most people I talk to don't know about, a thing called Minivend from Mike Hines. Absolutely very, very good piece of technology, and worked very well for me. Very surprised that not many people have heard about that. But anyway, that's what got me into Perl. I've been on the outside. I have Perl developers who I work with who are very much involved, but was introduced to the Perl Foundation possibly because I was outside of the community and maybe bring a different perspective. So that's me.
And you're the board president.
And I'm the president. Thank you very much. Must get that.
All right, I will go. My name is Makoto, and I am helping TPF for, I think, 10 years. I started as a volunteer, and I am still a volunteer, but I was a volunteer grant manager, then grant chair, now helping the board as secretary, writing Perl for more than 20 years.
Okay, I'll go. We should make a list. I am Ricardo Cygnus, RJBS. I was the pumpkin for several years in the late 2000s, and I've been on the board for, I guess, about 2 years now, something like that. I've also released a whole lot of Perl code, so you are probably unfortunately affected by my software work as well as my board work.
Hello, I'm Peter Krofchek. I'm currently the treasurer of TPF. I've been on the board for less than a year. I officially assumed the treasurer role back in January, and I'm just helping out at the moment, getting acclimated with everything that we do, much as I imagine all of you are about to become familiar with.
I am Curtis Poe, better known to many of you as Ovid. I've been hacking on Perl for about 20 years now. Obviously, I've released a fair amount of Perl code. Mostly it's the testing tools that I've worked on, which you're familiar with. The tap parser, which is currently shipped with core, a variety of other things, including test class Moose, which despite its flaws, I'm rather happy about. So, and I'm working on a new OO system for the core Perl language. Hopefully that'll get adopted.
Hello, I'm Mark. I'm the interloper. I am the ugly duckling among the southeast swans. I am not on the board, but I've been involved in stalking Perl people for about 20 years or so, and doing all sorts of community marketing, organizing things. So I get asked to come along. I am the chair of the marketing committee. I have also been on various other community committees with the Perl Foundation for more than a decade.
Right, I think that is all of the team.
Okay, and I've renamed you guys so that you will be, so people will be able to see what your position is. If I got it wrong, I apologize.
Thank you.
You misspelled treasurer. There you go.
I fixed it.
Misspelled stalker as well.
So ask questions.
Todd, yeah, Todd, do you have any questions? We have two queued from the GitHub. Shall we start with those?
Yeah, I think so. Nobody yet has raised their hand.
Right, no problem at all. Okay, so we have two questions. Firstly, there is a question, the status of Perl Doc. So and a note from regarding the question of Perl Doc, especially in view as Sawyer's mentioned of the docs during the keynote. So the challenge with Perl Doc is that the documentation is thorough, but it's quite hard to manage, partly because it includes core documentation, tutorials, references. There's a lot of different types of documentation, and they're not necessarily categorized in a way that's easy to parse. There's also the FAQ sections being FAQs 1 to 9, and there's various other information that makes it quite difficult. The opportunity with Perl 7 is to change some of the habits that have been around the documentation and potentially improve some of that. So, yes, Perl Doc needs some work. It needs a community around it. It needs a handover from what's gone before. It needs some of that knowledge and learning fed back into the community around it. And that then aligned with some of the opportunities that making some changes around Perl 7 and onwards can make. It could be that the grants program could be available to help some of the work there as well. So it's certainly on the radar, but we need to build that community. And it may well be that there's people here who want to volunteer to get behind that as well, and we can work on that collectively. Can
I just add one thing?
Please.
Yeah, so the question was also focusing on the perl.perl.org site. Just a reminder, TPF is not, like, we're not a group of people doing the technical work. I mean, some of us also do Perl stuff as well, like Ovid and me, many of us. But TPF doesn't like dictate the technical direction of this stuff. So, it's a volunteer project like many others. And as Stuart mentioned, people wanted to submit a grant request to work on it. That is certainly something that would make sense. But yeah, we don't. It's not up to us what code changes get made. It's up to you, everybody in the audience.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have two questions. Do you want to go to those, or do you want to finish GitHub?
There's one other one we can pick up from GitHub, which Curtis, I think you were going to pick that up.
Yes, so basically there's some questions being asked around the status of P5P, what's going to happen with Raku. They're going to have their own community. They do have their own community. And as technologies get larger, those communities need to be organized so they can direct their efforts better. So we want to help Raku thrive. And in order to do that, we've reached out recently to some of the more prominent Raku community leaders to get a better idea of who might be willing to participate in this effort. In particular, if possible, it would be lovely if we had some Raku representation in TPF and even on the board level. So we're waiting to hear back from them to find out what that is. We have our own ideas about what it might help to take them, build a community, and either work within TPF or if they want to create their own foundation. But in order for this to happen, we can't impose our vision. We have to understand what their vision is. So it's hard for us to give any specific answers because we can't commit to what they are going to do. And so we're trying to work with them to find the best way of moving forward on that. So that's me saying, I don't know. Did I cover anything? Was there anything I missed in that?
Yeah.
Really?
Really good. That's good. Good. Todd,
Okay, the first question is from Carl.
Hi. So about that Perl doc and Perl, I don't know, remember the download Perl site. So you cannot download Perl 532 yet. And there's a pull request from the Pumpkin to put that in. But if the Pumpkin can't get a pull request paid attention to, then probably nobody can. And so maybe this should be there should be some paid, not just grant, but maybe some paid time devoted to it. The Perl doc is off-putting to newcomers because, say, the links don't work. You get 404s, I'm told. People were complaining about this in the hallway chat yesterday, in fact. Several people were. So it doesn't present a very professional appearance, perception to newcomers or to Perl. So come here and not be able to follow a link to a particular document. So it seems like we ought to be investing somehow and perhaps not rely on volunteer entirely work on it. That was my.
Yeah, if as that's raised again, and clearly a very important point, then I think what we can do is we can take that away and see if we can get something. We can react to that quite quickly. I hadn't realised that it was issues with 404s, and as you say, the Pumpkin's not getting a response there. Sorry, Rick, did you want to add?
Yeah, I was going to say something that was mentioned earlier is, Dave said solving problem X is for the community to do, and I think that is often true. And the thing that we need to improve on both sides of this discussion is the way in which the community can say, we had to solve this problem and we found a solution, and we want the solution to keep going, even after the people who found it interesting to solve have found other things to do. And what we've had happen repeatedly in every open source project, but also in many of Perl's, is have someone say, well, I made it, I solved the problem, and pretty soon I can open it up and people can use it and install it anywhere. And first of all, install it anywhere doesn't really solve the problem, because what you want is a canonical installation of it. And secondly, the canonical installation then ends up being the thing that the person feels is done, right? I proved it out there, and now I can let it lie fallow. And that leads to the situations we have now, right? The Get Perl site worked, and eventually the work ceased to be interesting because it was entirely content related and not technology. And Perl doc similarly, right? perldoc.perl.org worked, and then it became content management. And I think that it would be good to establish a culture between TPF and resource creators whereby we can find a way to facilitate shared ownership, right? Where we can say, you can come to us and we can help use our channels and communication to find a way to take group ownership where the role of TPF, which has a limited number of volunteers, can largely be owning the keyring, right? And saying, we can make sure someone can always maintain this. Now, I will say I'm speaking off the cuff. This is not something the board has officially said we'd like to do, but I think it is the obvious way in which we can talk about solving this problem. Maybe that involves paying volunteers, but I think to a large extent, the issue is rarely volunteers. It is usually the ability of willing people to get access to running systems. And that's probably the most pressing problem to solve. And it's easy.
I will also note, I took a look at the pull request for perl.org. It has a conflict, and one of the people on the repo was like, hey, sorry, can you fix the conflict? And then nothing's happened. And of course, sorry has probably been busy. But I would just point out there hasn't been no response or anything. They are discussing it. Anyway.
Oh, I mean, when I looked at it, I think yesterday saw nothing like that. So anyway.
Oh, okay. Maybe it just happened recently. I wasn't paying attention to the typing.
Okay, the next question is from Joel.
I hope it's okay if I make a couple quick comments with regards to what we were just talking about. First of all, I would absolutely echo what Rick said, that the problem, I think, is often getting keys to the tools, not just building the tools. Having been involved in, say, MetaCPAN and some of those other side projects. I also want to say that I know Dan Book has his own Perl doc browser that is at perldoc.pl, I think is I always go to it through p3rl.org, the link shortener, but you know, there is a second version of this that could be used almost immediately, and it is open sourced on his GitHub. Then to my actual question, and I know I've brought this up at least once, but I have in the past done a TPF grant. Koto was my grant manager way back in the day, back for Alien Base. I was very appreciative of doing that that process, but it was certainly a big process. And I think as I've gotten to be more, you know, how should I say, a professional developer, I was able to do that grant because I was a grad student and I had the time, you know, and sort of the free space to be able to work like that. And I know that the grant program as it currently exists might be well optimized for someone like a contractor who may have gaps in his or her time coming up. You know, you apply for a grant ahead of time. Say, I know my current contract is ending. I'm going to apply for a 3-month grant to do some great big project. And then, you know, when it's done, I get paid and everything's good. But for someone like me now who is, you know, steadily employed, has some kids, has some time in the evenings, but not enough to even really think about applying for a grant, could it be possible that the TPF could have some curated list of, we will pay $500 if someone could attack this bug, or if someone could, you know, unscrew up the permissions for some service that needs to be, you know, reorged or something, you know, have things that people could pick up quickly and have a defined.
So like a bug bounty system.
Yes, exactly.
And security fits is a good one to aim at because they're the most important. So we could have that for that.
And I think that would fit with the sort of non-contractor people who'd be happy to knock out some of these bugs, but we don't even really have time to submit a full proposal and do that whole thing. Whereas I know that people would be happy to have certain of those fixed, but it, you know, if it could be something you could just pick up off of a pile and handle, that would be excellent.
Thank you. I think that's a really good suggestion. Would you be willing to work with us to develop that further?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, then that would be the takeaway from this. We can follow up afterwards, work out what we would need to do to make that easy for you, and then work with other people.
I have a couple of additions. By the way, Joel, long time no see. One, like Joel said, and like Joel did in the past, we have a grant program. We open the call for grants every 2 months. And earlier it was every 3 months, and it is every 2 months. And the max amount is $10K US. So if you have ideas, then feel free to apply the grants. And for the bounty ideas, actually, we have a community site, grants.perlfoundation.org. Let me paste it here in Zoom. Right. Here's a place where we can exchange ideas. I want to have us, can somebody do it? And then potentially Perl Foundation can give grant. Of course, we cannot pay grant for everybody, but still, right? Here's a place to exchange ideas. So you can take idea from here, or you can modify open issue in GitHub and then submit new ideas.
Okay, I think the next question is from Tommy Butler. He's off mute, but we're not hearing anything.
You may be muted on your headset or something, Tommy. The double mute problem is a very common one in meetings.
Double mute isn't unmute?
No, where you're muted in the software and then physically on your hardware.
I was trying to make a joke, my bad.
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, Linux. Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with TPF board. This is actually really awesome, and I'm a little nervous because I'm coming to you as somebody who really just rattles around the community and volunteers, and I've been using Perl for 21 something years, but I haven't really gotten involved in any kind of conferences, with the exception of one time when I was able to attend in Texas. It's just work, life, always very busy. And so that's kind of the angle that or I should say that's the lens that I look at Perl with. I look at I look at Perl through the lens of somebody who uses Perl for a living and somebody who's been doing so for a long time. And the Perl that I use for a living is Perl 5, now going to be Perl 7. So very excited about that. Talked a little bit about that with the community last night. The question I'm coming to you with is a little bit about, and please forgive me if I'm coming to you with a question that is a little without context, because I don't have a lot of context. Admittedly, I'm trying to get those answers now. So the question is around direction. Where does TPF want to take Perl? For me, it's abundantly clear where the community kind of wants to take Perl. I've seen stuff on, for example, on the Facebook group where I volunteer. I've seen Will Braswell's idea for the Perl community roadmap that has a lot of very lofty ideas, goals that I think are good to strive for. And I'm wondering, what is TPF's direction for Perl? Where do we want to take Perl? What do we want to do with Perl? Or are we just happy with where we are? Can you kind of clue me in?
So from TPF's perspective, as it was mentioned earlier, we're not taking Perl, the development as such, we're not directing that, but we are supporting it, and we are working with some of the core developers. We were in conversation with Sawyer and the team regarding some of the visions and the objectives that they had. So our job here is to support the things around that and make sure that Perl and Raku have every opportunity open to them. That's what we're here for. Of course, we want Perl to be at the front. We have a lot of aspirations for Perl, and I think that will come through with other initiatives that we've got coming on in the near future. And again, through the marketing activities, advocacy, brand and messaging, we'll bring some of that out. But it's not for TPF to be saying, this is what we want the development team, the core development team to do, but we will work with them. There'll be things that maybe we'll discuss because the community wants them. It may well be that sponsors want to influence the direction and manage that either through grants or through other activities. But at this point in time, it's very much working together between the organisation of the non-technical activities and the technical activities. So I think that's kind of how we are now. I'm not sure if there's a proposal or a suggestion that maybe we should be more or less involved in that.
I add to what Stuart's saying. Being a lot of mixed with the community side of the TPF and the marketing side for a long period of time, I get this a lot. A lot of people in the community see the TPF as the head of a body, and that's not really what it is. It's more the fact that the community is made up of lots of different gears that are not connected together, and TPF is merely a chain that links all those gears together. So we don't actually do any role, we more make you guys connect. And that should be the role of the TPF. We should just be the connecting between all these different gears. All these different facets of our community should be able to spin on their own, do their own thing, and the TPF should merely enable that they work together. And don't see it as we're guiding you, it's that we don't move unless you move.
That's a very interesting analogy. I mean, I don't think that there's any denying the influence that TPF has in terms of where they decide to invest their dollars. I mean, dollars drives development in many cases. I've never taken money for anything that I've done with Perl, but I know that other people do depend on those grants in order to move forward with their projects. And when TPF makes the decision to fund one project versus another, it is a little bit influential. So I don't want to just dismiss that out of hand.
I can answer that though. The entire of the grants committee is volunteers, and it can be any volunteer from the community, so anybody can be sitting making those decisions. And also to that, the sponsorship money itself can be targeted by the person who sponsors. So for instance, there was a thing a few years back where money was sponsored only for Perl Sits. All of that money just went towards Perl Sits. There was the Core Foundation grant towards Perl 5 Core, and all of that money went to the Perl 5 Core and enhancing the Perl 5 Core. And so we're not actually deciding where that money goes. It's more that it's either targeted for a specific thing, or a group of volunteers drawn from the community decide where that money goes. The TPF as an organization don't just go, oh, we'll spend the money on that. The only time they ever actually do that is in terms of conferences. And that's merely just to help support conferences, because it's a big risk and a big financial risk running a conference. So again, it's more of a perception problem. It looks like we have power, but actually we're not. We're again led by the community.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the grants. All the grants are posted on the news.perlfoundation.org site, all the proposals, I should say. And there's a public comment period for a reason, which is the grants committee, well, volunteers from the community, also wants to hear opinions from the community at large. I imagine that, I mean, I'm not on the grants committee, but I'm sure if, a proposal were posted and the grants committee was like, oh, that sounds good, and then a whole bunch of people in the community were like, no, this isn't a good idea because of X, they're going to listen to that. And vice versa. If the community is, super strongly in favor of it, that's going to have a big influence. So like Mark said, we're not sitting around with like big piles of money and just deciding what to do with it. We're facilitating, basically we are a facilitation for taking money from mostly companies and spending it in ways the community as a whole thinks is a good idea.
Okay, this does help clear up some misconceptions on my part. And it helps me understand a little bit better what questions to ask next, which would be, how do people like me who are more, like I said, I'm focused on Perl for my work or what I do to volunteer in the community. How do people like me get involved and help the TPF? And also, I'll just leave it at that question for now.
Thank you. Todd, do we have further questions? You're muted there, Todd.
We do not. I was just asking in chat. So far, nobody has responded.
So I can go back to answering the end of Tommy's question of how do you help? Well, you literally just volunteer and say what you want to do, what you think you can do. And hopefully there'll be something you can do. There's plenty of, as has already been said, there's plenty of different initiatives inside what the Perl Foundation is connected to. There's certainly plenty of things that are done in terms of code. There's plenty of stuff that's done in terms of time that's done with marketing, which in my personal opinion, not enough is spent on. So there are quite a lot of ways you can volunteer. And merely talking to us, I think maybe it's been a case of people don't know they can just literally ask somebody on the Perl Foundation, how can I help? And they'll get a response. Because it has been assumed that there's this head and a body, but it's not. It's the gears and we're just connecting the gears.
And some specific things that I know we have open right now. We're looking people to help out with the community affairs team, which Stuart had mentioned. I'm sure there's lots of other specific things we can think of. I don't know if we're looking for grants committee members at the moment. We are interested in talking to more Raku people for the board. I'm sure there's lots of things I'm not thinking of at the moment. Stuart, are there other things you would like to add to that list?
Yeah, so from a volunteer's point of view, We've had in the last few months quite a few new volunteers joining various initiatives and activities. But I think what we need is more people supporting the volunteers. So people whose role is there to communicate with the volunteers and make sure that they have what they need. The risk is that a volunteer is busy doing the activity that they're there to do, but maybe lose contact with the Perl Foundation or other people. So we need some outreach, some people who can join these networks together. So if there was a role that I could ask for a volunteer for now, it would be 1 or 2 people who could look after our existing volunteers and make sure they have what they need. So that would be that would be a volunteer I'd ask for now. The CAT Community Action Team, so far it seems to work very well. We could potentially do with 1 or 2 people to add to that. Marketing, again, join us on tomorrow if you're interested in marketing, because we need to work out what that means to us. It's not simply here's a marketing plan, let's go and do it. It's more complex. Perl it's been around for a while. It's broad. Raku being new, there's all sorts of differences between what needs to happen for both of them when it comes to the brand and messaging. So anyway, we need to work on that. I think one thing I'm really pleased about through this conference is the positive messaging following Sawyer's announcement. That is really good. I would be asking people to be talking about Perl and getting those statements out there. It happened. I think the reaction to Sawyer's talk was very positive. So very pleased to see that. And wherever people can share that news and keep the conversations positive, then that's welcome. But do feedback as well. Tell us what it is like today where you have the opportunity. But it's not just today. The Perl Foundation is there to listen all the way through. So come and tell us when something is not right. Don't let something fester. If something's bugging you, don't let it fester. Bring it to us. Tell us what it is. Give us the opportunity to make it work. The Perl Foundation and the Perl community it's a codependent relationship. We're no good without the other one. The Perl Foundation is nothing without an active, healthy community, and also supports the generation and the sustainability of that community. So we all need to work together. It's not them and us. I had a comment, a friendly comment just yesterday around someone who's saying it's good to talk to the people at the top, and my response was that this isn't about being at the top. This is, we have our roles, and our roles are important, but we shouldn't be considered as some kind of hierarchy where we're at the top and you shouldn't really talk to us. We all need to work together, and that's how we're going to move forward.
Okay, we have a question from Don.
Can I just jump in for a second?
Ahead.
I have a question for the board related to what Stuart said. Stuart, how do we recommend people come to us with those questions? What's the most effective way for someone to say, I have a question for or a suggestion for TPF? So
my first response will be the Slack channel. I'm not sure that works for everyone, but there's a good place to engage. On the blog post that I've put out, I've included my email address, and people have contacted me off the back of that. So that there's that. Possibly back to the volunteer management. Possibly we need to get a community email address where maybe we can.
Yeah, I think
invite people.
This sounds like, I think I agreed with everything you said in your answer, and I think then we get to how do you give us that feedback, and that's something we can do better, and we can probably do that this week. So I'll make a note. I'm sorry. Thank you, Todd.
Continue with our email fix-up work.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and a great outcome would be for us to publish a community email address that you can easily use. Sorry, Todd, there was a question you wanted to.
Okay, go ahead, Don.
Hi, and you may have touched on this a little bit, and I may have missed it, and I apologize if I did, but I do, I help organize a local workshop for Perl, and in the past we've been told to try to get our local sponsors, so we use sponsorship from the Perl Foundation as a whole to put our events on, but we often try to find local sponsors. At one point, I think I'm just not sure what we're supposed to be doing at this point. Are we supposed to have local sponsors just support the Perl Foundation and then use the Perl Foundation's sponsorships for art to like fund our event? Or should we be actively seeking specific local groups to sponsor our local event, the DC Baltimore Perl Workshop?
Pete, do you want to pick this up regarding whether sponsor money should be managed centrally or locally?
So I believe it essentially depends on the amount and purpose of the sponsor money for what you're looking to do. So if you're trying to get a sponsor for a meeting space or whatnot, TPF almost seems like it would be a good intermediary, but there's an extra step there that may not necessarily be necessary. But on the other hand, if you're trying to organize a like a workshop or something like that, TPF involvement would probably be a more useful thing to have. So I guess ultimately it depends on the size and type of the sponsorship. And if you have those sorts of questions, please feel free to email me those. You can actually email treasurer@perlfoundation.org with those sorts of questions, and we can discuss and get back to you on those.
Thank you.
And I'm just picking up some notes around Slack, and I guess yes, it's not for everyone. It's what Perl Foundation have used, because I think the people within the Perl Foundation have used it within their organisations. But if it does become a barrier to us working with our community, then we need to revisit that. And Todd, do we
Okay,
have,
great.
Next
questions? We have a question from Salve. His microphone's unmuted, but we're not hearing him. You're very distant.
How about now?
That's good. Go ahead.
Awesome. Hello, my name is Salve Nilsen. I'm from Oslo, Norway. Been part of Oslo Perlmongers for many years. Like 17 years now, actually. So I've been spending some of my time the last few years in other organizations than the Perl community. And I've ended up involving myself in a large one called the Internet Society, and I learned quite a lot about about how they organize a large, very heterogeneous organization that is international and has deep interests in technology and making sure it gets out there among people. Their focus is the internet and access to that, but I still see a whole lot of commonalities between that community and the Perl community, and that's one thing I would like to just shortly bring here for your consideration. The first and most important thing I've learned is that the board there and the which is basically an organizational body, and the board of trustees, which is an advisory body, and the support organization in that community, they don't make a lot of decisions at all, much like the TPF doesn't make a lot of decisions, but they do have some decision power for things that are relevant for everybody. And what I would have loved to see is that the TPF took a proper consideration about trying to find a way to get a mandate to make such decisions on behalf of the Perl community. Now, the type of decisions, of course, shouldn't be any type of decision. I'm looking for a very narrow type of mandate. For example, in the things that are non-technical but still very community relevant, or something that binds us together. And things that could qualify for something like that is, say, for example, the question of a Perl community logo. That is, in my opinion, something we really don't have at the moment. The Perl Foundation has an onion, which is confusing with the Tor project. There are other kinds of logos here and there, but nothing really that we can visually use to bind each other and bind us together as like one community. And we have very few, if any, ways of speaking in unison because there is no coordinating body. I understand now that this is a little bit about to change now with the current generation in the Perl Foundation board, and the marketing efforts is going on there, which is awesome. But some of those things that help us basically become an actual community that where we can go out there into the world and show that we are part of this community in a more, let's call it, coordinated manner, I think would be a good thing. But that requires a little bit of chutzpah, so to say, from somebody. And in my opinion, having followed this community for as long as I have, I think the natural choice for me would have been the Perl Foundation for a long time ago, and in many ways still are. So I would urge and ask you to, if you guys in the TPF board would see if there's a way where you can gather a mandate in some way. I don't know how you would go about doing that. It might be over a year or two gathering votes at Perl events, have representatives from the different stakeholder groups, bring their votes from their groups to a central venue. Anything, I'm sure you'll figure out a good way of doing that. But just the act of having a real mandate that allows you to make decisions that are meaningful on behalf of the community, so that we can become a stronger community and have a better ability to go out in a concerted manner to do our outreach, which we badly need. We've been badly needing that for like ever. I think that would be a super useful step forward, and I hope that you guys would like to consider that properly in the time forward. So if you...
Okay, thank you, Salv. So I would be interested to find out more about where the feeling is that mandate is needed. I guess the difference between where we are today and what would that then give us? It certainly needs exploring, and I think your proposal will be very interesting. It might work with some other initiatives we've got, but it's really about the objective. Should we have that, what could we then do that we couldn't do today?
Yeah, that's a good exploration to do. My main point in suggesting this is to change your idea of what your role in the of your role in the community is. Right now, like Mark said, you are more like a chain that makes sure that a bunch of wheels work together, which is a fine picture. But it was still, there's a few types of decisions that we should be able to do as a community, which we cannot do because there's nobody there to do it. There's no governing body. There's no one who will raise their hand and gather the mandate, so to speak, to actually do that in a real way.
Okay, well, I think we should possibly explore that further, unless there's other people who would like to use the time now to do it. But I certainly think it warrants further conversation around that with the board. Thank you very much.
Okay, I apologize if I miss anything in chat. It's been flying by in Zoom. Carl has a question with his hand raised. We technically have 1 minute left, but we have a soft 5 minutes if we need to close up this conversation.
So just, even though you guys, so I was going to say about the infrastructure, there's these things that seem to just get worse. And somehow it seems if I publicize it to the board, there might be somebody listening. So a minor inconvenience is that since we moved to GitHub, we get an email every several days saying there's been no action. And it's because there's a server that nobody here has access to that wasn't able to be migrated to GitHub somehow. And I have no idea. I could set up a message filter to throw it away.
So can I jump in here, Carl? Because I get that email too. I have gone down a bit of a rabbit hole on that one, simply because I get that email and it's not a great look. And what it seems to come down to is that server has detached itself from our universe and is connected only through a gateway that lets it send mail to Perl 5 porters. No one knows where it is, how to fix it, has access to it. And the operators of Perl.org, which is, again, a community-run service where the infrastructure is effectively privately held and not in escrow by the Perl Foundation, are very nervous about the idea of trying to filter those messages out at the boundary. So I think that there's two answers here. And one is, I'm on it. I want to get those to go away. They're not great. It was simultaneously yesterday, I got Perl 7 has been released, and also there's been no activity in Perl, which is it's a strange world we live in. And the other part of that, the problem is going back to infrastructure and how is it that we can establish, an escrow or a sharing of control of this infrastructure so that when the people who have traditionally managed the email servers say, I just can't, I'm too concerned that if I touch it, it's going to fall apart and then it's all my problem. And instead we can say, can we establish some people who can come in where control is being held in a safe way and we can make these changes without being concerned that it's going to fall apart. And if it means that we have to pay some money to do it, we can consider that. But right now, the way things stand, if I had $10,000 to fix this problem, there's no one to take it. So I think on the specifics, we're doing what can be done. And on the general, I think that there is a general means forward that we need to investigate. And I hope that answers your question.
Okay, but here's another one.
Can I follow up on that? TPF, or we have a couple resources in Perl 5 porters that over the years have been generously donated by different companies. And what has come up as related to this email and to other things is that what happens is over time, people at those companies kind of fade away, and it becomes more difficult to interact with that. It really actually seems like it might be time for TPF to fund something on DigitalOcean or Amazon or some other service where they actually owned and paid for that infrastructure. Has that been discussed? Would the board be open to that?
So I think the action at this point would be to get a few people together from the community and have a committee, as we have the Community Affairs Committee and so on, whose interest is improving the infrastructure. Because I think if we design as a group of 100 people, we have so many different opinions, and TPF again don't necessarily want to try and answer these, but facilitate the right thing. So I propose that we get some volunteers who would like to be part of a group who will work to solve these problems and put proposals forward with the full support of the Perl Foundation.
But just to answer one part of Todd's question, would we spend money on that sort of stuff? Sure. Yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't be very expensive these days with VBS stuff. That's absolutely a reasonable thing to suggest.
Okay. So I think we have to.
I apologize. Now. Yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to say thank you very much, Todd, for moderating it. Thank you for the questions that we've had, and please continue to ask TPF further questions.